Greetings everyone, I'm back again to speak with you about music. Usually I say records, but today I wanted to make a point that however you're listening to music and however music is making a contact to the greater cosmic realms in your life, that's the most important thing. That said, within records we have sonic infinity. Depending on the types of equipment and your perceptive capabilities, these sonics can have profound effects on our existence, both for ourselves and how we interrelate with others and the rest of the world. So I call records spiritual tablets because of that sonic infinity. That said, today I'm going to talk about Wolfgang Dauner. Wolfgang unfortunately passed away this week. I believe he was 84 years old. Came out of Germany, classically trained, fully formed in the extensible jazz tradition. Wolfgang is a significant musician. He made so many interesting records and crossed paths with so many interesting musicians. Some of them, to me, extremely important but somewhat obscure, but their juxtapositions with more prominent musicians makes their positions even more relevant once you get to discover who these people are. Again, that's an important aspect of record collecting. So here we have a watershed electronic record, because here the electronics still in the tactile state before we're getting into the digital realm. The sonic elements are palpable. So the collisions between postmodern electronics, jazz, avant-gardism, and rock music become very, very clear. This is a document that anybody that's into any of those genres should look at more closely. Fred Bracefeld's on drums on this record, Eberhard Weber on bass, a trio that is filling up a lot of space, making a lot of sound, relevant sound, granular sound that will certainly pique the curiosity. This is one of the early ECM records and really set the tone for the label. JPO and ECM were kind of corollary imprints that Manfred Eicher had created at the beginning, 1969, 1970-ish. And again, this is ECM 106, so it's the 6th record. And beyond even the historical eminence and relevance of ECM, this record just holds it from every point. So if you want to understand the lineage of the music and how it's evolved from its origins, this record is important, but also the music itself. So give it a shot. Wolfgang Dauner, rest in peace. Here's one of the salient masterpiece records of the 1950s. Art Blakey with the Thelonious Monk Quartet, or Thelonious Monk with the Art Blakey Quartet. However you want to cut it, they're both extraordinary figures, and the key to this is the relationship between Thelonious Monk and Art Blakey. I mean, obviously Blakey had played on other Thelonious Monk records, but this one here, it's just pure magic. Whether it was because Atlantic cut the record, whether it was a different environment for them to record in, whether it was just these guys were having a really good day, there's something that where the palpable abstraction of the language maintains a primitive power that makes the music so it's just powerful. And you know, again, you know, a lot of jazz records, we go into technical aspects. There are some that just have an atmosphere to them that are magic, and you know, and those types of things cannot be put into words. It's like trying to put into words the depth of love that somebody might have for someone or something. Sometimes words just aren't enough, and records like this, and there are a number of them, are like that. And but again, here, you know, Johnny Griffin's on this record, and he is just playing off the hook, totally inspired by his two cohorts coming out of Chicago. The gunslinger from out west coming east. The young Griffin is finding the context for himself with guys like Monk and a bunch of the other modernists, and over time was to mature into one of the greatest tenor players. In other words, cutting the note value down, the phrasing and the space between his notes and his melodic ideas to a point where, regardless of whether he's playing a flurry of notes or one note, he's undeniably Johnny Griffin. So a record that should be on the radar. This is a Black Label Deep Groove pressing from 1957 of a remarkable record. So extending one of my previous sessions talking about Pat Metheny and Lyle Mays, I wanted to continue today with a wonderful record by the Pat Metheny group, the universally loved Off Ramp. To me, this record just changes the game. The essence of the Pat Metheny group obviously involves so many variants as far as musical content. But this record here assimilates all of these things in such a beautiful way. The wonder that I have with this record, the wonderment that I have for this record is the interrelationship between Pat and Lyle and how they compose together. You can certainly feel Lyle's influence in terms of the church, in terms of the continuum of classically orientated harmony, Pat's melodic sense, his deeper imbued jazz tradition, his pop sensibilities. Pat would say that he was about to get into the Beatles, and all of a sudden, you know, Miles Davis record popped into his life, and it changed the game for him. But I think within the backdrop of his life and Lyle's existence, the better pop elements in the most tasteful sense have been utilized in music like this, so that you have oblique, interesting harmonic references, you have and percussion and rhythmic elements. But you also have, you know, a dream world. You have an idealism that allows itself to come forth within the realities of the time that the music was created in. So this record here embodies that for me. I think a number of the records for the Metheny group do this, but with this record, it really sets the tone. Are You Going With Me? Olé, 18 with the church organ. There's some magic on this record, and for those that haven't cut their teeth with the earlier parts of the Pat Metheny catalog, go back to the beginning, work your way through, understand the eminence of this group and how important it was. So here we have a favorite pianist of mine of the 1950s, and he's a favorite player not because he's an over-the-top virtuoso, not because he's an over-the-top stylistic game changer, but because he's himself, and that's the one and only Randy Weston. Randy came up from African roots, born in the mid-1920s. By the end of the 1940s, he's becoming trained in the modern idiom, ultimately rubbing elbows with Thelonious Monk, who actually gave him lessons. He loved Monk, loved Herbie Nichols, he loved a number of the modernists from that era. But he becomes his own man because there's a lyricism and there's a gentleness in his music, a power through this gentleness and lyricism that is striking. So the early records that Randy makes on Riverside are very noticeable. The trio records and the ones that extend themselves with a bigger ensemble are very memorable records. There's somewhat oblique and abstract harmonic references in some of the material, but it's gentle because it's weighed through almost an impressionistic point of view. almost a fantasy point of view. The boy from Brooklyn finds his way to balance these two worlds, the street with heaven. And so this record here is a little bit later, United Artists. Jack Lewis decides to sign him. He did a number of records. This is the one that really takes hold. The compositions are moving, they're noticeable. His use of waltz time, the waltz rhythmic element in his music, extremely moving. There's almost like a documentative kind of noirish feeling to some of this music, that you are being transported back to the patinas of buildings and neighborhoods, and odd comminglings and juxtapositions of events and people and architecture that conspire to create a very beyond understandable reality. This music kind of does that. Johnny Griffin is noticeable on this record as well. He plays beautifully on this record, and this is a transitional record for Johnny Griffin. Less notey, more space between notes, more attention to melodic content, and his melodic content relative to the harmonies is very noticeable. So he's the fastest gun from the West coming east is now tempering into becoming a mature musician, and adds a lot of flavor to this record. So check it out, 1958, United Artists, mono, deep groove copy. Not an easy record to find. It's not a Dead Sea Scroll rare record, but keep your eyes open. Randy Weston, a must record.